The girl who knew his name. The lunch rush was already roaring when the bell over La Memon's door chimed, and Fate walked in wearing a navy suit. Emma Sullivan felt the knot on her red apron slip in her trembling hands. Late again. 15 minutes, to be exact. Marcel's clipped scolding still hung in the air, along with the warning that the Hayes party, investors in tow, had specifically requested her section. The name struck like a match, Alexander Hayes. 6 years since the Hamptons. 6 years since a weekend that felt like a promise and vanished like a rumor. 6 years since she'd tried to find him and heard, via an assistant with a knife for a voice, that he didn't take calls from weekend flings. So Emma did what single mothers do. She swallowed the ache, gave her daughter the surname that belonged to him, and learned to live on tips and courage. "Mommy, I don't want to sit in the back room all day," 5-year-old Lily had whispered, blue eyes bruised with disappointment. Those eyes. The exact color Emma had never been able to forget. "I know, Peanut," Emma said, smoothing the cardigan at her daughter's shoulders. "But Marcel said this is the only way. Tablet. Juice. I'll check in between tables." She'd meant it. She'd believed the storage room, clean, quiet, a little desk with paperwork, could keep Lily out of sight. Out of danger. But danger, Emma learned, doesn't always look like danger. Sometimes it looks like a man arriving precisely on time. He was somehow sharper than her memory. Silver threading the dark at his temples, a jaw you could cut glass on, and a quiet force that made the room adjust to him. He greeted the hostess, nodded to his guests, and followed her, inevitably, into Emma's section. "Good afternoon, gentlemen," Emma said, voice steady because it had to be. "Welcome to La Memon. I'm Emma." He looked up. Ice blue recognition hit and faltered. "Have we met?" "Don't believe so, sir," she said, eyes on the notepad, not his mouth. "Special today is cocoa vin with seasonal vegetables." They ordered. She moved. The room spun on schedule. Until it didn't. "Mommy," came a small, breaking voice from the entrance. The dining room paused. Marcel moved first, apology already loaded, marching toward a frightened child who had slipped from the back room and into the wrong story. Lily saw him before she saw her mother. Those blue eyes widened, tears vanished as if on command, joy broke across her face like sunrise. She ran. "Daddy!" she cried, throwing her arms around Alexander Hayes's legs. Silence, shocked and absolute, fell over crystal and linen and executive conversation. The notepad slid from Emma's fingers and clattered on tile. Somewhere, a fork rang like a bell. Alexander stared down at the child wrapped around him, then up at Emma. The world narrowed to 3 people and a word. I'm so sorry," Emma said, moving, reaching, untangling a little set of arms. "She's confused." "Lily, honey, you can't." "How old is she?" His voice wasn't loud, but it cut the room in half. "Sir, I apologize for." "How old?" he repeated, standing. The investors, the maitre d', the entire staff seemed to hold their breath. "I'm 5.5, Lily announced, proud and certain, holding up her fingers like evidence. You could see the math land behind his eyes. 5.5. Plus 9 months. Hamptons. Silver temples, blue eyes, a life rerouted in a heartbeat. "We should talk," he said to Emma, low, controlled. "Privately." "I'm working," she whispered back, desperate for a normal shift that had evaporated 30 seconds ago. Marcel materialized with the oily grace of a man smoothing crises. "Mr. Hayes, please accept my apologies for." "No apology necessary," Alexander said, gaze locked on Emma. "We'll use your office." Emma had no ground to stand on but the truth. She took Lily's hand and followed him through the corridor of stairs. In the office, the air was too bright, too thin. Alexander paced once, a prowling line in an immaculate suit. Lily hopped into a chair, investigating a caddy of dried pens with the authority of a small queen. 5.5, he said. "And you never thought to tell me I had a daughter?" "I tried." Emma's arms crossed on instinct, not defiance. Protection. I called. I left messages. Your assistant told me you weren't interested. After the fourth time, I understood. He stilled. The anger that flashed there wasn't theatrical, it was surgical. I never got those messages. I left you a note that Sunday, Emma said, the old ache suddenly raw. On your bathroom mirror. With my number. My address. There was no note. They stared at each other, the shape of a missing thing looming between them. A piece of paper, a string of calls, a door closed by a hand that wasn't his. The past reassembled itself with a new culprit. From the chair, Lily held up a drawing, 3 stick figures holding hands. Look, Daddy, she said, as if she'd been calling him that her whole life. Us. He crouched beside her. The steel in him softened so fast Emma's heart lurched. Hello, Lily, he said, and it was the gentlest sound she had ever heard from him. That's a beautiful picture. He stood, decision already formed. DNA test. Tomorrow. 10 o'clock. My office. I'll have my doctor there. He scribbled on a card and handed it to Emma. This is my personal number. No more assistance. She pocketed the card with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. I need to get back to work. You won't lose your job, he said, jaw set. I'll talk to Marcel. I don't want your... It's not charity, he said, not unkindly. It's responsibility. The word burned. Responsibility. As if money could be retroactive. As if child support could buy back first steps and wobbly first words and a dozen birthday candles she'd lit alone. A knock. Marcel. The lunch rush, relentless. 15 minutes, he said. 10 a.m., Alexander reminded, eyes searching hers for something neither of them could name yet. And Emma, don't disappear again. I never did, she said softly. You just weren't looking in the right places. She led Lily back through a world suddenly altered, heart pounding to the rhythm of a new truth. The secret she'd carried like a talisman, a weight, a prayer, was no longer hers alone. Outside, the restaurant breathed again. Inside, 3 lives had already changed. Chapter 2: Paper Crowns and Purple Wishes. Paper Crowns and Purple Wishes. The receptionist at Hayes Industries had a smile polished to a weapon. Emma smoothed the skirt of her best navy wrap dress, and tried not to notice the floors that gleamed like water or the way Lily's voice carried in the quiet. Inside voice Peanut, she murmured. The watch read 10 minutes early. The receptionist continued to make them wait 20 minutes past the hour. Message received. This was his world, and in this world, time was a lever. Miss Sullivan, the receptionist finally announced. Mr. Hayes will see you. The office was all glass and skyline and deliberate restraint, like the man himself. He ended a call, stood, and the room rearranged to his gravity. Emma. Lily. He nodded, and then, almost as an apology, he crouched again to Lily's level. Do you remember me? You're my daddy, she whispered, shy as a secret. Something moved behind his eyes, not weakness, not victory, recognition. Dr. Porter made the swab into a game, and Lily giggled obligingly. When it was done, Alexander walked the physician out and came back with a manila folder that felt heavier than paper. The results are tomorrow, he said. We both know what they'll say. In the meantime, my counsel prepared some options. Child support. A visitation schedule. A proposed custody plan as tidy and unrealistic as a calendar page. Weekends, Wednesday nights, boxes to be colored. You've been busy, Emma said, the ambush too familiar. Yesterday you learned her name. Today you schedule her life. She's my daughter. The edge there was fear, not arrogance. I don't intend to waste more time. You're thinking like a CEO, Emma said. Not a father. Silence. He didn't flinch. He recalibrated. What do you suggest? Start where she is, Emma said. Dinner visits. Stories. Good nights. A Saturday afternoon next week. Increase when it feels like routine, not rupture. He considered. For once, he didn't argue. I'll amend the plan, he said. And the support. "We've managed," Emma said, the reflexive armor of pride and habit. "It isn't about managing," he replied. "It's about what's right. For her future." A knock of a different kind softened everything. "Coloring table," Lily announced, discovering a corner station stocked with crayons and cookies. Emma blinked. He'd prepared. For a child. For their child. "Lunch?" he asked, unexpectedly tentative. "I'd like to know what she loves, what she hates. And there are things we should discuss." His eyes flicked toward the folder, then back to her. "Coral Cafe? The one with the aquarium. You know Coral Cafe?" "I know what my daughter will like," he said simply. At the restaurant, Lily pressed her palms to the glass, awed by schools of jewel fish and a stingray that drifted like a sigh. Alexander watched her with reverence, as if someone had handed him a cathedral. "She's extraordinary," he said, not looking away. "You've done," he broke off, searching for a word big enough. "You've done everything." "She's my everything," Emma said, and for once the sentence didn't feel like bravado. It felt like truth standing in daylight. He turned to her fully. "Tell me. First word. First steps. What makes her laugh? What she dreams?" She said book first, Emma said. "Walked at 10 months. Purple is holy. Green vegetables are a betrayal. She can read early readers. She names butterflies." He smiled then, not the corporate half-curve but the old, private one she remembered. The one that made her weak in the Hamptons when he'd been a man, not a myth. "Stubborn?" he asked. "She got that from you?" Emma said before she could stop herself, and something like a truce breathed between them. After lunch and a ceremonious fish feeding, he drove them home because "I should know where my daughter lives" was not a threat but a sentence that belonged in the world now. The apartment, small, spotless, warm with Lily's artwork and the green of rescued plants, made him hesitate at the threshold as if he were afraid to touch the edges of a life that had been moving without him. "It's not much," Emma said, reflexively defensive. "It's a home," he answered, and it landed like respect. In Lily's room, Purple Kingdom, stuffed animal parliament. He listened solemnly as he was introduced to Ellie the monster-fighting elephant and the purple crown and the rules of bedtime. He looked, for a strange, tender moment, exactly like a man at peace. "Park," Lily requested, already grabbing both hands, small and large. They went. At the swings, he learned the arithmetic of pushes and laughter. At the slide, he learned to wait at the bottom with hands up. On the walk back, he learned how small she felt between them, holding both, chattering in a stream that turned the ordinary gold. And Emma learned something too. The chemistry she'd tried to bury had not died. It had become something cleaner, deeper, an ache with a future attached. The test arrived, though neither of them needed the numbers. 99.98%. Paper that did not change what anyone already knew but somehow made everything real enough to sign. A week drew its own rhythm. Alexander came after work, read stories, learned pajamas, learned how she liked the corner of her blanket folded back exactly once. Emma met Zoe for coffee and answered questions she didn't know how to ask herself. He was cautious about time, aggressive about apology, more vulnerable than the man in the navy suit would allow anyone else to see. Tonight, after Lily's eyelashes sank, he stayed. His jacket on a chair, sleeves pushed back, he looked younger by a decade and heavier by 5 years he couldn't have back. "She's asleep?" he asked. "Out cold," Emma said. "Park days are magic." He nodded, exhaled. "Emma, there's something else." He didn't circle. He never had. "My former assistant, Brenda Carter. She didn't act alone." A muscle jumped in his jaw, the tell she remembered. "My mother instructed her." The past rearranged itself again. The note vanished not by accident, the calls strangled on purpose. Not indifference. Interference. "Your mother decided I wasn't good enough for you," Emma said, surprise gone, sadness left. "So she erased me." "She erased my daughter," he said, and it was the first time his voice broke. Victoria Hayes returned from Europe the next day. A lunch at the club was proposed. Emma refused a spectacle. He offered neutral ground, his penthouse. I want her to face what she's done, he said. Not to punish. To understand. And to meet her granddaughter. Rules, Emma said. One word that hurts Lily and we leave. No scenes. No speeches. No using our child as a blade. You have my word, he said. Lily first. Always. For once, words were big enough. He also asked about custody again, and this time when she explained too much too soon, he didn't posture. He listened. Adjusted. Asked his attorney for a gradual plan. Offered support not as leverage but as duty. She didn't say yes, but she stopped saying no. Tomorrow will be interesting, he said at the door. Does your mother know Lily exists? No, he said. But she's about to. Then she should meet a Hayes who knows what matters. Emma met his gaze and surprised herself. We'll come. He swallowed. Thank you. When he left, she leaned against the door and let herself feel it all. Rage at the woman who stole 5 years, relief that the missing wasn't neglect, fear of the storm she'd agreed to walk into, and above all, the fierce clean certainty that whatever else happened, Lily would not face any of it alone. The next day, Victoria Hayes walked into her son's penthouse with a posture like a verdict, and froze at the sight of a small girl with familiar eyes coloring butterflies at a marble island. Alexander, Victoria said, composure fraying a fraction. I wasn't informed this would be a family lunch, he answered. Mother, this is Emma Sullivan. And my daughter, Lily. The word "my" cracked the room open. Victoria's gaze skipped from Emma to Lily to Alexander and back again. The shock was undisguised. The calculation was brief. What replaced both was something harder to categorize and impossible to dismiss. Hunger. She looks like you did, Victoria murmured, startled into honesty. When you were small and took puzzles too seriously. Lily, Emma said gently, this is Miss Hayes. Daddy's mother. Your grandmother. I never had a grandmother, Lily said plainly. Do you like purple? Victoria blinked. Yes. The answer was real. Good, Lily decreed. Then you can come to my birthday. It's purple. And just like that, adult machinations were dethroned by a child with a color palette and a calendar. Lunch was a study in temperature. The chef's genius plated itself while Alexander asked precise questions and Victoria answered with precision dulled by something like regret. Emma watched the older woman watch Lily. Curious, wary, softening by degrees she seemed almost ashamed of. Dessert came with a rooftop invitation. Alexander took Lily to the garden with instructions about bees and the miracle of seeing a city from above. The elevator closed, and the two women faced each other without a buffer. I owe you an apology, Victoria said. No prelude. No choreography. A significant one. You do, Emma agreed. No rescue. No grace before it was earned. I thought I was protecting my son, Victoria said. From a distraction. From a mess, if I'm being honest. I didn't ask what you wanted. I didn't imagine this. She glanced toward the elevator, toward a granddaughter she'd missed on purpose. I can't undo the damage. You can't, Emma said and watched the truth land. But you can decide who you want to be now. Victoria nodded once, like a woman receiving orders she intended to carry out. If you allow it, I'd like to know her. Properly. On your terms. A pause. The armor shifted. I kept Alexander's toys. 4 grandchildren I wasn't sure I'd have. It would be a privilege to see them used. The elevator dinged. Lily's voice rang like bells. Mommy, there's a pool on the roof. And flowers. And the wind made my hair dance. Did you thank Ms. Hayes for lunch? Emma asked. Thank you, Lily said to her grandmother with solemn courtesy. The cake was the best cake of all cakes. You're very welcome, Victoria said, and Emma saw it. Something in the older woman's face collapse and reform into someone softer. We should find you a purple dress for your birthday, she added carefully, looking to Emma for permission. That would be fine, Emma said, surprised to realize she meant it. On the drive home, Lily sang to herself about fish and sky and birthdays. In the front seat, Alexander spoke quietly. "Thank you," he said, "for showing up, for setting rules, for standing your ground without slamming the door." "It was the right thing for Lily," Emma said. "He didn't press the and for us?" That hovered between them. He had learned some silences now. He would learn more. At the curb, Lily unbuckled and sprinted toward the lobby. Emma and Alexander stood in the afterglow of a day that had held more history than a museum. "Whatever we are," Emma said, voice low, candid, "we're her parents. Second chances don't knock. They move in." 2 weeks turned the park into a kingdom of purple butterflies. Streamers arched, balloons bobbed, a bounce house inflated into gleeful shrieks. The party guest list read like a treaty. Kindergartners, waitstaff friends, Zoe, armed with snacks and sarcasm, and a Hayes contingent, carefully briefed and surprisingly human. Alexander arrived early, sleeves rolled, tie abandoned, directing deliveries with enviable competence. Victoria arrived bearing a purple dress and a careful smile that wasn't careful by the time Lily hugged her. William Hayes, quiet, kind, the antidote to pedigree, arrived with a hand-built wooden dollhouse whose working lights made Lily gasp. Emma, who had braced for condescension, found herself liking the man whose gentleness explained the best parts of his son. "She has that effect," Emma said, watching Lily throw her arms around her grandfather. Alexander's hand found hers without asking. The fit was still there. So was the warning in her head. Both could be true. Over cake and candles and a wish Lily refused to reveal, Emma made one for herself: courage. Not to be reckless. To be brave enough not to run. The cleanup blurred into conversation, laughter, 100 small kindnesses that add up to something you can stand on. When the trash bags were tied and the children sugar-drunk and drowsy, Alexander tugged her gently aside by the shade of a maple tree. "Move in with me," he said, like a man who has decided and intends to make the world agree. Not the penthouse, a home. With a yard. Room for a purple bite. We do it right. Together. There it was, the impulse that made empires and endangers peace. "We've been back in each other's lives 3 weeks, Emma said, more steady than she felt. "Lily finally sleeps through the night again. You and I," she gestured toward the air between them. "There's a lot we don't know yet." "I know enough," he said softly. "That I missed 6 years of you and her. That I don't want to miss another day." "And if we don't work?" she asked, unflinching. "If we break all 3 of us open again?" "Then we don't break," he said simply. "We build. Carefully. On purpose. I'm not the man who let you walk out of a Sunday morning and disappear behind an assistant's lie. I'm the man who learned what happens when you don't fight hard enough for the right things." She searched his face for the boardroom reflex, the need to win, and found something else, a steadiness that didn't require victory to feel like love. "One condition," she said at last, and let the wish she'd made over candles into the air. "We date. Like mortals. We earn it. We learn each other with school pickups and boring Tuesdays and the flu. We keep separate roofs until together makes sense to a child, not just to our hearts." He smiled then, the kind that reaches the eyes. "I can work with that." His thumb traced a circle over her knuckles, a silent amen. "May I kiss you, Emma Sullivan? Consent isn't just a word. It's a door you open when you're ready." She rose on her toes, tasted 6 years of almost, and discovered something both new and familiar flair to life. Lily's delighted squeal broke them, and they laughed like people who hadn't forgotten how. "Does this mean we're a real family?" Lily asked, certainty waiting behind the question. "We already are," Emma said, meaning it. "We're just figuring out the shape." "The shape is us," Lily decreed, placing her small hand in Emma's, and Alexander covered both with his. For once, there was nothing to argue with in a child's logic. In the weeks that followed, routines threaded themselves into a fabric strong enough to hold weight. Alexander made peace with Wednesdays as pasta and puzzles instead of immediate overnight. Child support moved to a college fund and then into a trust that would exist whether or not Alexander did, because that was the point. Victoria practiced humility until it began to look like grace. William taught Lily to sand dollhouse shingles with care. Zoe remained Zoe, which is to say, a friend who would show up with soup and the truth even when you didn't ask. And Emma, who had taught herself to do everything alone, began to learn the tenderness and terror of not having to. There were messy parts. There always are. A night Lily cried because she wanted both good nights and there was only one set of arms in the room. A day Emma snapped at Alexander about a loaded dishwasher that wasn't. A morning when the old fear surged and Emma found herself at the kitchen sink with tears and a history she thought she'd already cried empty. He didn't fix it. He didn't argue. He put a cup of tea in her hands and sat on the floor across from her and said, "I'm here," and meant it, and learned that sometimes that is the repair. A month later, on an ordinary Tuesday, a courier delivered boxes from Hayes Manor labeled in William's block letters. Alex, ages 5 to 8. Inside, a universe of wooden trains and battered picture books and a note that read, "In case she wants to build a world." Lily did. They all did. The restaurant where the world had flipped watched from a polite distance as life unspooled. Marcel, who had the memory of an elephant and the manners of a diplomat, assigned Emma to early shifts to make dinners possible, and 6 months later, he took great personal credit for what he called the reunion of the century. On slow afternoons, a hostess whispered to new servers the story of the shy waitress whose daughter ran to a CEO and called him daddy, and how, somehow, that hadn't ended in scandal but in the quiet revolution of a family being made. Spring came back with wisteria on the trellis and an email from a headhunter Emma had politely ignored twice. Alexander found it open on the table and said, "Go on the interview," like a man who understood a thing can be both support and boundary. She went. She got the job. She negotiated hours around pickup time and a salary that didn't require 3 doubles a week. When she came home breathless and disbelieving, he lifted Lily, who screamed, "We celebrate with pizza!" And they did, because Emma had finally learned you don't need to apologize for joy. Summer found them at the park again, because some places become holy in the ordinary. William taught Lily to fly a kite. Victoria learned how to sit on grass without looking like she'd been sentenced to it. Emma didn't flinch when Alexander laced their fingers in public, not because she needed the claim, but because it felt like telling the truth out loud. On an evening washed gold, they returned to La Memone. Marcel greeted them like a stage manager on opening night. The staff, new faces and old, pretended not to watch. They took a corner table that used to be his, and now was simply theirs. "To beginnings," Alexander said, raising a glass. "Even the messy ones." "To second chances," Emma answered. "To purple," Lily added, absolutely right. When dessert came, creme brulee that cracked like satisfaction, Alexander's hand shook just a fraction. Emma saw it. He wasn't a man who trembled at markets or mergers. He trembled at stakes that couldn't be insured. "What?" she asked softly. "I had the deed drawn up today," he said, voice even. "The house. Yard. Front porch. We can close whenever we decide. Or we can tear it up." He paused. "I meant what I said. We move at her speed. At yours." She took his hand across linen. "Bring me to see it," she said. Saturday. It was not a yes. It was not a no. It was movement, which is what life honors. When they left, someone held the door and a breeze lifted Lily's hair, and Emma thought, unexpectedly, of the girl who ran into a dining room with a broken heart and a sure instinct and rewrote a story adults had made too complicated. Sometimes doors you're terrified to open are the only ones that lead home. A year later, there was a wedding. It wasn't the ball Victoria's friends would have staged, nor the rustic fantasy Zoe threatened to DIY. It was a ceremony in a garden behind a not too big, not too fancy house with hydrangeas and a purple bike leaning against the porch rail. William walked Lily down the half aisle, because Lily decided it that morning, and everyone nodded like it had always been the plan. Victoria cried, the private kind, and later told Emma that regret is a poor teacher but an excellent compass if you let it be. The reception? At La Memone, of course, Marcel's finest hour. He told the story to anyone who asked and many who didn't. The day a little girl shouted, "Daddy!" and cracked open a room and a man and the future. In the last dance light, Emma rested her head on Alexander's shoulder and felt the steady proof of a heart that had learned how to stay. "Do you ever think about the note?" he murmured. "On the mirror?" "Sometimes," she admitted. "Mostly I think about the business card. The one that said call me directly." He smiled against her hair. "I will never stop answering." "Neither will I." Across the room, Lily hopped between tables, collecting hugs, a crown of paper butterflies bouncing with every step. She caught their eyes and beamed the kind of beam that says, "I knew you two would figure it out." Because she had. This is how legends are born. Not from miracles, but from small, stubborn hope. From a woman who kept a photo in a box, not to worship the past, but to tell the truth about a beginning. From a man who stopped letting other people answer his phone. From a child who named what she saw and did not care who was watching. Nothing about it was easy. Everything about it was worth it. And if, years from now, someone asks Lily how her family started, she will say it began with a lunch rush and a word said out loud in a room too fancy for shouting. She will say that love is not always lightning. Sometimes it's a door you walk through, a Wednesday night pasta, a backyard with chalk and a dog named Ellie. Of course they got one. She will say, "I ran across a restaurant and hugged my dad." Everyone went quiet. And that was the moment the three of us became us.